and welcome back to my channel. So today I have a speed bake for you. So basically that's when I bake and decorate a cake and then I just speed it up and take out all the more boring parts. And especially the wait times in between the different processes that go into making a cake. So this cake is actually a peppermint cake, and I decided that I wanted to experiment with that because peppermint to me is a really strong flavor, but what I ended up doing was putting a little bit of peppermint extract in the cake layers themselves, and then I just used vanilla buttercream to help balance out the peppermint, and it actually turned out really good. I was really worried it was gonna actually end up tasting like toothpaste or something. That was my biggest fear, but it actually turned out really nice. And then I actually decided in between the layers to do a red and white stripe, since I have some candy at the very end you'll see me put on top of the cake that looks like a candy cane. And I decorated it with crushed peppermint as well, so you'll see that a little bit later on. So right now I am just applying a crumb coat, which is basically a thin coat of frosting that you put on the outside of the cake that helps trap in all the crumbs, hence the name crumb coat. Because if you ever tried to actually frost a cake and you might get all those pesky crumbs inside of what you're trying to make your really nice finished layer of frosting, and that can be very frustrating, especially if you try to pick them out or something. What this does is it locks in all those crumbs, so then you don't have to worry about it. And then you just pop it in the fridge for a little bit so the buttercream can harden, and then you don't have to worry about the crumbs anymore. And then you come back and you put your final coat of buttercream on, and then ta-da, crumb-free cake. So for this, I actually ended up doing some stripes. Again, red and white, right on theme. And the way you actually do stripes is you put on, for me, I decided to do white for the first coat. So I put a bunch of white frosting on, and then what you're actually gonna end up doing, you can kind of see it on the counter there, is using a cake comb or a frosting comb, depending on what you wanna call it. You use that to actually scrape away and create the white stripes. And then what we're gonna do is actually end up putting it in the fridge for a little while. I usually put mine in the fridge for about 20 minutes just to let it harden a little bit. And then what you end up doing is then coming back with the other color you wanna use, or multiple colors that you wanna use. In my case, I used red. And then I'm gonna come back with a piping bag and pipe inside of kind of the divots that were created, and then smooth it out. And the reason you want to set it in the fridge in order to harden a little bit is because when you go back to actually scrape off the red frosting that I'm going to add, you want to avoid mixing the two colors if you want those really nice clean lines. Of course, another option to do stripes is you can just pipe on the stripes yourself and smooth it out. That can be a very good option as well. You just make it a little more mixing of the colors. That's also a way to do an ombre cake if you're interested in doing that. You just put them on and then intentionally mix them a little bit when you smooth out your frosting. So you can see here I'm kind of adding a little bit of frosting back, and this can be a little bit time consuming, but it is very important that you get those base stripes really nice, solid, and thick. The reason for that is you can imagine if there is a divot or a little hole in one of those white stripes that I'm creating, then when I go back with red frosting, what can happen is the red frosting can get in that divot, and then all of a sudden I have a spot of red inside of my white stripe, which obviously is not what I'm going for here. So if you make sure it's nice and solid, there's not a chance for the other frosting to get in to the original frosting, if that makes sense. So then when you scrape it off, then you don't have to worry about that. And also making sure it's a little bit of a thicker stripe, make sure that you have room to actually scrape frosting off. Because if you don't, leave extra frosting on it, when you scrape it off, then all of a sudden you're scraping all of your frosting off. And then I'm just giving it a nice solid top, flat, nice, good to go. And then I actually, like I said, I cut that piece out, but pop it in the fridge for about 20 minutes, take it back out, and then I'm adding in the red frosting here. So just piping that on with a piping bag. Again, doing it with a piping bag helps you be a little more particular with where you are placing your frosting so that it doesn't get everywhere. And you kind of, when you're doing stripes, you just have to trust the process. At first it doesn't look great, and you just really have to be patient with it. And I feel like it's definitely worth it in the end. If you get those nice clean stripes, it is gorgeous. And so you can see here I'm scraping and then wiping off what I have the red and white on there. And again, reason being, you have both red and white on the scraper. You don't want to keep doing that to the cake, otherwise you might get some mixing. And you can see here that I've got a little bit of bleeding, but that's all right, because as you scrape it off, it's all on the surface and it will go away. And again, you come back through, and when you're scraping, just fill in some of those places you might need it. You never know, you might need to add a little bit of white, so I would suggest having that on hand too if you want to add that color in. And then I'm just filling in there on the top as well, because I want to be able to take that and scrape it into the center. And the reason you do that is most people want, for most looks anyways, want a nice sharp corner on the top of your cake. So if you have extra frosting that kind of sticks up over the cake, what that allows you to do is smooth it towards the center of the cake, and it creates that really nice corner for you. Again, that's also the reason it is kind of the way to get another sharp corner is to actually place your top layer upside down. If you saw me do that earlier, all my other ones were right side up, but the last one I put down, because what that does is the bottom of your cake layer is actually the cake part that was actually inside of your pan, and it naturally has a really flat, clean surface. So when you do that on the top, that helps you get nicer corners, a flatter top, and kind of helps with that kind of look. And then I just topped it off with a little bit of a swirl because I just like the way that looks, and a little, like, I guess you might call it a hack. It kind of allows you to not have a super perfectly smooth top. If you put that swirl on it, you know, nobody would ever know it wasn't perfect. And then I just take my crushed peppermints and kind of lay that along the bottom. I'm doing this in a tray to kind of keep all of those pieces from going all over my kitchen. I do the same thing with sprinkles if I do a border, and then just using an offset spatula to just press those crumbs into the side of the cake. And that also allows you a way to pick up the cake and kind of scrape off any extra, and that goes right in the pan, so you can either reuse it and it doesn't make a huge mess. And I also took some of the bigger chunks and put that around the bottom as well, so it kind of looks like the peppermints kind of coming up the cake, and I just thought that looked really nice. Of course, you can do the same thing with sprinkles or whatever kind of decorations you want, crushed cookies, you know, whatever. And so just adding a few of those, and I honestly really like placing really specific sprinkles and pieces like this. It actually kind of, like, I get in a zone, you know, like really focused, and it's something that I really enjoy. And then we're just going to scrape off all of the extra right into that pan, because I am going to put a little bit of chopped peppermint on top as well. I actually found a bag of chopped peppermint, which made my life a whole lot easier, but you can, if you can't find that or don't want to spend money on it, you can just crush up some candy canes. You can put them in a bag, beat them with like a rolling pin or something like that to help crush them up. And then the last thing I'm going to end up doing is actually just putting some swirls on top. In order to help me actually put the swirls on really evenly, I actually end up using like a round cookie cutter and using that to help me like stencil out exactly where I want the swirls, because there's nothing worse than trying to put swirls on a cake and then realizing they weren't even or symmetric, and then you have to scrape them off and start over. So I just use that as a really easy way to guide me. You can kind of see the imprint there on top of the cake, and then usually there's about 8 little swirls on top, and then I just put both white and red frosting in the piping bag, and then I'm going to top those with those red and white candy canes on the side. I just found those and thought those were super cute. And then we're going to go and add in the extra crushed peppermint on top. Not a ton, but just a little sprinkled on top, just to add a little bit of pizzazz, if you know what I mean. And then just kind of evening out those pieces and making sure they're none of them are like leaning inwards and that kind of thing. But if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to see more like it. There's also a link down below with the playlist of my other baking videos. I hope you have a really sweet day. Bye, everybody.